This is the Navigating the 3D View tutorial. Um, Much of the information which we go over here is widely available in tutorials on YouTube, so it will be a little bit redundant, but I also like to quickly go over it for the Open Dental CAD users which have never had experience to Blender. So we'll go over the basics quickly before getting into um, some of the little more advanced features that I find particularly useful when using Blender in conjunction with dental CAD operations. So I have a list of objectives here, and I'll try to keep this video under 10 minutes. So make sure you're using a version of Blender similar to the one I have here. And also I've copied the objectives into a text box that I've included with the example.blend file. Also, if you notice right here in this area, the Blender will be displaying the buttons and keys that I'm pushing. I'll try to say them as I press them as well, but if I misspeak, or if you want to go back and quickly see what I'm doing, pay attention to this area down here. So the first thing is panning and rotating. Simply hold the middle mouse button, drag your mouse, and you'll rotate around in the scene. If you hold shift and middle mouse button at the same time, you can pan. It's important to note that you're not moving these objects, you're simply moving where you are viewing the scene from. So it's you that's moving within the scene. Another way to move about is to use the number pad. If you're using a laptop, the numbers across the top of the keyboard will not work unless you enable a setting in user preferences. But if you're using a full-size keyboard, the number pad 7, 1, and 3 will let you view the Z, Y, and X directions respectively. Holding Control at the same time will take you to the reverse of those directions, so negative Z, Y, and X. Using 2 and 8 will allow you to, I like to think of it as pitching and yawing in an airplane, but it's just a different form of rotation. And sometimes using the keyboard to rotate is a little bit more predictable. Less useful is holding Control and using these same ones to pan, but I find that panning is easier with the mouse, the occasional rotation with the number pad, but really using the number pad to return you to orthogonal views once you get displaced in the scene. In larger, complicated scenes, you may find yourself with the cursor over here, and your view over here on some object. It's good to know how to return to baseline. And Shift C will both center the view and center the 3D cursor. Oftentimes, it's also nice to limit your view spatially. There's several ways of doing this. Alt-B will actually clip the scene so that you're only viewing what you've clipped. Now, you can pan and rotate around just as before, but only the area within that clipping volume is displayed. Alt-B to reset the clipping border. This can also be a useful tool for viewing an object in cross-section or thin slices. Alt-B. Now you can examine the object in cross-section. Shift-B will zoom the 3D view to the box that you've selected. I like to use Shift-C to return to normal. Shift-B. And Shift-C to return to normal. If we want to limit our view in relation to certain objects rather than spatially, we select the object we'd like to view, hit the slash on the number pad. That will take us to a local view of the object, where all the other objects in the scene are hidden. Slash to return. This also works for multiple selected objects. You can take several objects into local view and then return back to the global view. some of the more advanced features, you hit N to bring up the number pad. We can lock the view to the cursor. This will allow us to move the view by simply placing the cursor. We still rotate around the cursor, but you'll notice Shift plus the mouse button no longer has any effect. So to pan, you place the 3D cursor with the left click. So we can place the 3D cursor on Suzanne, Shift B to zoom in, Alt B to take a slice, and 6 on the number pad to rotate around. Alt B to unclip the view, Shift C to recenter everything. We also notice in the number panel here that the 3D cursor location can be controlled explicitly. By locking our view to the 3D cursor, we therefore have very precise control over our view as well. Furthermore, we can snap the cursor to different objects in various ways. So Shift S will snap the cursor. We can snap the cursor to selected. That will snap the cursor to the origin of the selected object. So for this tooth, it's in the center of the object, more or less. For this implant, we see the origin is at its apex. Okay. While keeping the view locked to the cursor, I'd like to point your attention to a couple tools here in the OpenDentalCAD add-on that can be used in conjunction with this for more precise visualization. First is this little, I've duplicated the 3D cursor icon. If we select this object, just for demonstration purposes, I will show its bounding box. We press this button and we'll snap the cursor to the center of the 3D bounding box. This is useful for objects such as this implant where its origin is not in the center of the object. Here you see this will move the cursor to the center of the bounding box. Down here in the undo/redo panel, we can use these 6 options to snap the cursor to any of the faces of the bounding box, any of the edges, or any of the corners. So this will take us to the Z face, take us to the negative Z. This will take us to the to the YZ edge, and then this will take us to a corner, and we can mix and match the positive and the negative to jump to different corners. So, just for demonstration's sake, I'll put the cursor in the front of the bounding box, and then I'll show you this tool called Slice View. This is really just a collection of different settings to make the view into what I call the slice view. In slice view, you get 3 orthogonal views of a certain thickness, which you can specify here, and 1 oblique view, which you can rotate, and I believe if this were not locked to the cursor, you can pan this around as well. But while in slice view, you can then snap this to different places on the object. This is an example of how I would examine the interproximal contacts of restoration. Furthermore, we can use our explicit 3D cursor control to precisely, or if you'd rather move it in small increments, to take slices up and down or left and right across an object. This returns its normal view. Shift C to center the scene. And right at 9 minutes and 55 seconds, I hope I've given you enough to familiarize you with navigating in the 3D view.